Hey guys, tonight we're drifting into one of history's most awkward dinner party topics: cocaine. Not the disco era celebrity kind, not the Miami Vice kind. I mean the actual, historical, globe spanning journey of a mysterious white powder that went from sacred leaf to medical miracle to social menace faster than you could say, wait, they gave this to children. So before you get comfortable, take a second to like the video and subscribe, but only if you actually enjoy this strange little corner of the internet we've built together. Leave a comment telling me where you're listening from and what time it is for you. Somehow, no matter where you are, it's always late, you're always tired, and this is always a bad idea before bed. Now dim the lights, turn on a fan or some gentle white noise, get comfortable, and let your shoulders drop. Also, quick moment of honesty before the history kicks in. This is a brand new channel. Like newborn. Still smells like fresh algorithms and crushed dreams. So if you're enjoying this even a little bit, consider hitting like and subscribe. Not in a hard way, more like a gentle historical nudge. Microdose the button, just enough to feel it. And do me a favor, tell me in the comments what time you're watching this. Because somehow, no matter where you live, it's always 1:47 a.m., you're half asleep, and you thought learning about drugs from history was a responsible choice. It's okay. We're all here for the same reason. Poor decisions, but calmly made. All right, back to the leaf. You don't need to solve anything tonight. Just listen. Let's pause for a moment and ask a few questions. Have you ever wondered how a plant chewed in the Andes ended up reshaping global finance, medicine, crime, and pop culture? How did something once used to survive high altitudes turn into a symbol of excess, ambition, and ruin? Who decided this was a good idea to put in soda? Did anyone ever stop and say, maybe we shouldn't sell this at the pharmacy next to cough drops? And most importantly, how did everyone involved think this would end well? And now, congratulations. You just woken up thousands of years ago, high in the Andes. The air is thin. Your head hurts. Someone hands you a leaf and tells you to chew. This, apparently, is where everything starts. You wake up surrounded by mountains so tall they look like they're trying to leave Earth. The air is thin, your lungs are confused, and your body feels like it forgot how oxygen works. A local hands you a small green leaf and gestures for you to chew it. This is coca, and right now it's not illegal, immoral, or scandalous. It's survival. You sit up slowly because standing up too fast at this altitude feels like your soul briefly leaving your body to file a complaint. The ground beneath you is rocky and cold, and the wind slides past your ears with the casual indifference of something that has been here far longer than you. Every breath feels unfinished, like your lungs are buffering. The people around you don't seem impressed. They move calmly, deliberately, wrapped in thick woven clothing. No one is panting. No one is dizzy. No one is dramatically reconsidering their life choices. You, meanwhile, are considering a nap, a juice cleanse, and possibly never climbing stairs again. The leaf is placed in your hand like a small, polite suggestion. You chew it, slowly. At first, nothing happens. Then there's a faint bitterness, grassy and sharp, like spinach that's trying to be brave. Your mouth tingles slightly. Your tongue feels awake. Your headache loosens its grip just a little, like it's decided to give you a break. This is coca in its original form. Not a party trick, not a status symbol, just a plant doing plant things. For thousands of years, people here have chewed these leaves to deal with altitude, hunger, exhaustion, and long, physically brutal days. It dulls pain. It eases breathing. It tells your body, gently, that it might be okay after all. You notice how casual it all is. No ceremony, no dramatic warnings, just a quiet understanding passed down through generations. This leaf helps. That's it. No one is trying to escape reality. They're trying to survive it. Work begins early. You watch people prepare for long treks across unforgiving terrain. The coca leaves go into small pouches, measured and respected. This isn't excess. This is moderation baked into tradition. You chew, spit, chew again. The rhythm matches the mountains, slow, patient, unbothered by urgency. Your hunger fades slightly. Your fatigue softens around the edges. You're still tired, but it's manageable now, like carrying a heavy bag with better straps. You understand why this mattered. At this altitude, everything costs more energy. Even existing feels expensive. Spiritually, coca matters too. You see offerings made, leaves placed carefully as gestures of respect to the earth, the mountains, the unseen forces that control weather and fate. This plant isn't just useful. It's sacred. It's woven into belief, community, and survival. And here's the important part. Nobody is spiraling. Nobody is losing control. Nobody is staying up for 3 days reorganizing their hut and emotionally confronting their childhood. This is balance. This is restraint. This is a relationship with a substance that hasn't yet been hijacked by ambition. You sit quietly, chewing your leaf, staring out at peaks that don't care about your plans. The world feels slower here. Smaller, more honest. Coca, in this moment, is just another tool humans use to adapt to a harsh environment. It will not stay this way. But for now, up in the clouds, before empires and laboratories and profit margins, it's just you, the mountains, and a leaf that helps you breathe. And for the first time since waking up, your head doesn't hurt quite so much. You learn quickly that coca isn't a party drug here. It's woven into daily life, used for altitude sickness, hunger, fatigue, and spiritual rituals. People chew it slowly, respectfully, the way someone else might sip tea. No mirrors, no bad decisions, just getting through the day. You sit among the villagers and notice how unremarkable the act is. No one is hiding. No one is whispering. No one is pretending this is rebellious. Chewing coca is about as exciting as tying your shoes. It's something you do before work, during work, and sometimes while quietly contemplating the mountains like they're judging you. The leaves are shared freely. Someone reaches into a pouch, offers you a handful, and you accept without ceremony. There's no rush. Chewing too fast would be rude, ineffective, and frankly suspicious. This is not a culture built on urgency. Everything moves at the pace of breath, footsteps, and daylight. You notice how coca fits neatly into the rhythm of life. Before a long walk, people chew. Before carrying heavy loads, people chew. Before dealing with cold, thin air, and bodies that would really prefer sea level, people chew. It doesn't make anyone superhuman. It just makes the day possible. Hunger fades into the background, like turning down a radio that was playing static. Pain softens. Fatigue loosens its grip. You're still aware of your body, but it's no longer screaming at you for existing. It's the difference between suffering and functioning. Spiritually, coca has weight. You watch as leaves are offered to the earth, to the mountains, to forces that don't have names in your language. It's not dramatic. No thunder. No chanting. Just quiet respect. The leaf represents balance between humans and nature, effort and rest, need and restraint. What's striking is how controlled it all is. There's no excess. No one is chewing handfuls nonstop, chasing a feeling. The effect is subtle, almost polite. You could miss it if you weren't paying attention. And that's the point. Coca isn't meant to overwhelm you. It's meant to support you. You think about modern life for a moment. Energy drinks, coffee, supplements with names that sound like rejected sci-fi villains. Entire industries built around pushing the body harder, faster, longer. Here, the goal isn't productivity. It's endurance, survival, harmony with an environment that does not negotiate. Coca is taught, not marketed. Children grow up seeing adults use it responsibly, understanding when and why it's appropriate. There's no mystery, which means there's no temptation. It's just another tool like a woven blanket or a sturdy sandal. You work alongside others carrying loads, tending animals, moving across steep terrain that laughs at your knees. You chew slowly. You breathe more easily. You still struggle, but now it feels honest. Earned. You're not escaping the work. You're meeting it halfway. As the day winds down, the chewing stops naturally. There's no crash, no craving, just tired bodies settling into rest. The leaf has done its job and politely stepped aside. And this is important to understand. For thousands of years, coca existed like this. Grounded, controlled, integrated into culture and belief. It wasn't a shortcut to power or pleasure. It was a quiet agreement between humans and a harsh landscape. You sit by the fire as the sky darkens, your jaw tired from chewing, your body tired from work. You feel calm, balanced, present. This version of coca will not survive contact with the outside world. But for now, here in this moment, it's still sacred. Then the Spanish show up, armored, loud, and deeply skeptical of anything they didn't invent. They had the coca leaf like it's witchcraft, pagan nonsense, or both. Naturally, they ban it, briefly, until they realize it makes workers more productive. Suddenly, it's fine. You hear them before you see them. Metal clanking, boots on stone. The unmistakable sound of people who traveled very far to be extremely confident about things they don't understand. The Spanish arrive with crosses, swords, paperwork, and a firm belief that they are in charge now. They watch the locals chewing leaves and immediately assume something sinister is happening. This is not wine. This is not bread. This is green. Therefore, it must be evil. Someone mutters about demons. Someone else writes it down so it can be taxed later. At first, coca is condemned. Priests call it a pagan ritual. Colonial officials say it encourages laziness, idolatry, and general non-Spanish behavior. You're told it must be eradicated, burned, forgotten. The leaf, apparently, is the problem. Then the mining starts. High in the mountains, silver veins are discovered, and suddenly everyone needs labor. Lots of it. The work is brutal. The air is thin. The hours are endless. Indigenous workers collapse from exhaustion, hunger, and altitude. Productivity drops. Profits suffer. This is unacceptable. Someone notices something. The workers who chew coca last longer. They complain less. They survive shifts that would otherwise break them. The leaf dulls hunger, reduces fatigue, and helps people endure conditions that should honestly come with a warning label. The ban quietly disappears. Coca goes from sinful to strategic in record time. Spanish officials begin regulating its use instead of outlawing it. They distribute it to workers. They tax it. They control its sale. The leaf is no longer sacred. It's a resource. You watch the hypocrisy settle in like dust. Publicly, coca is still frowned upon. Privately, it's encouraged. As long as it keeps the minds running, everyone is suddenly very flexible on theology. This is where the relationship changes. Coca is no longer about balance or survival on your own terms. It's about extraction of minerals, of labor, of human energy. The leaf becomes a tool of empire, quietly fueling wealth that will never return to these mountains. You stand near the mines and feel the shift. The chewing continues, but the context is different. The work is harsher. The stakes are higher. The leaf helps people endure something that should never have been asked of them. Spanish merchants grow wealthy selling coca to the very people forced to work. The leaf circulates through colonial economies, taxed and controlled by those who once condemned it. You can almost hear history clearing its throat again. The irony is thick enough to chew. Coca, once accused of corrupting souls, is now endorsed because it keeps bodies functioning under cruelty. The leaf didn't change. The power structure did. You realize something important here. This is the moment coca stops being just a cultural practice and starts becoming a commodity. It's no longer shared freely. It's sold, measured, controlled. Its value is no longer spiritual or communal. It's economic. This pattern will repeat itself over and over again. A substance is discovered. It's condemned. Then it's profitable. Then it's regulated. Then it's exploited. The script writes itself. Humans just keep performing it. As the sun sets behind the mountains, you watch workers file out of the mines, exhausted, chewing leaves to keep themselves upright. The Spanish officials count numbers. The church counts souls. The empire counts silver. Coca keeps everything moving, and you get the uneasy feeling that this is only the beginning. You watch as coca becomes an economic tool. Miners chew it to work longer hours. Plantation owners encourage it. The leaf is no longer just sacred, it's profitable. This is history's first hint that coca will always end up serving power before people. The change is subtle at first. No announcements, no ceremonies, just paperwork, licenses, controlled distribution. Someone, somewhere, decides how much coca is acceptable per worker, per day, per shift. The leaf is now an input, like rope or oil or bodies. You notice how coca markets appear near mining towns. Leaves bundled, weighed, priced. Taxes collected. Spanish administrators regulate who can sell it and when. The leaf that once moved hand to hand now passes through official channels. Profit settles in quietly. Workers are encouraged to chew more, not because it's good for them, but because it's good for output. Long shifts become longer. Breaks shrink. The coca doesn't remove suffering, it stretches it. It turns human limits into suggestions. You stand near mine entrance and watch the ritual repeat. Workers chew. They descend. They return exhausted but upright. The leaf keeps them functioning just enough to go back tomorrow. It's not mercy. It's efficiency. Plantation owners take note. Coca spreads beyond mining into agriculture. Fields at altitude are unforgiving, and coca helps workers tolerate hunger and fatigue. The leaf becomes a management strategy. You don't need to feed people as much if they're chewing. This is where things start to feel modern in a way that makes your skin itch. Coca is now part of a system designed to extract maximum labor at minimum cost. Nobody calls it cruelty. They call it productivity. The sacred rituals fade. Offerings to the earth become less common. The leaf still exists, but its meaning has changed. It's no longer about harmony. It's about endurance on someone else's terms. You overhear conversations between officials. They talk about yields, quotas, efficiency. Coca is mentioned alongside numbers, not people. Its success is measured in output, not well-being. And the workers know it. They feel the shift. Chewing continues, but now it's compulsory in spirit, if not in law. If you don't chew, you fall behind. If you fall behind, you're replaced. The leaf becomes a quiet requirement. You notice how dependence begins to form, not chemical addiction in the modern sense, but economic reliance. Entire communities are now tied to coca markets controlled by colonial power. The leaf feeds the system that traps them. Coca production expands. More fields, more control. The plant itself is reshaped by demand. Leaves are selected for potency. Harvests optimized. Even nature is adjusted for efficiency. This is the first time coca is asked to be more than it naturally is. You step back and see the pattern clearly now. A substance enters a system of power, and the system immediately asks, how can this make us more money? How can it make people work longer, complain less, and cost less? The answer, apparently, is coca. By the time the sun sets, you realize something unsettling. The leaf hasn't become evil. It hasn't changed its chemistry or intent. Humans have changed how they use it. Coca is no longer a choice. It's infrastructure. And once a substance becomes infrastructure, it rarely goes back to being sacred. You feel history leaning forward, preparing to accelerate. Laboratories are coming. Ships are coming. Curiosity is coming. And coca, now fully embedded in global systems of labor and profit, is about to be discovered by people who will ask an even more dangerous question. What if we made it stronger? Centuries later, European scientists get curious. They isolate the active compound from the leaf. They name it cocaine. It's white, crystalline, and exciting. You can almost hear the collective gasp of 19th century laboratories lighting up with terrible ideas. You leave the mountains behind and arrive in Europe, where the air is thicker, the buildings are taller, and everyone is extremely proud of their opinions. This is the age of experiments, discoveries, and men with impressive facial hair who believe curiosity alone counts as safety protocol. Someone brings coca leaves into a laboratory. They're no longer chewed. They're measured, dried, crushed, dissolved, filtered. Beakers clink. Notes are taken. Eyebrows rise. Something interesting is happening. Eventually, a chemist isolates the alkaloid responsible for coca's effects. It's pure, concentrated, refined. They call it cocaine because giving it a sharp, scientific name makes it feel controlled, respectable, and definitely not dangerous. You watch the transformation with unease. The leaf has been stripped of context, culture, restraint, and ritual. What remains is potency. The subtlety is gone. The balance is gone. This is coca without breaks. Scientists test it on themselves because, of course, they do. They report increased energy, alertness, confidence. Their papers are enthusiastic. This substance sharpens the mind. It lifts fatigue. It feels modern. No one is asking what happens later. In laboratories across Europe, cocaine becomes a marvel. It numbs pain. It stimulates focus. It feels like progress. The fact that it comes from a plant once chewed by miners and farmers is considered charming trivia, not a warning. You notice how quickly excitement replaces caution. Dosages are guessed. Side effects are shrugged off. Addiction isn't fully understood yet, so it's politely ignored. This is science in its optimistic phase, where everything new feels like a gift. Doctors begin experimenting. Cocaine is used in eye surgeries, dental procedures, and minor operations. Patients don't scream. Surgeons are thrilled. Journals publish glowing reports. This is medicine's new favorite toy. The white powder spreads through academic circles like gossip. It's passed around at conferences, discussed over drinks, praised in lectures. Cocaine becomes associated with intelligence, progress, and sophistication. You stand in a lecture hall as someone explains how this compound improves mood and performance. The audience nods. They trust the lab coat. They trust the data, such as it is. No one has lived with this substance long enough to fear it. Meanwhile, the original coca leaf is barely mentioned. Its history is flattened into a footnote. The sacred becomes scientific. The cultural becomes chemical. The leaf is no longer a relationship. It's a resource. This is the moment cocaine truly separates from its origins. It's no longer tied to survival at altitude or spiritual balance. It's tied to ambition, productivity, enhancement, the desire to be more than human, just a little longer. You realize how dangerous that idea is. Europe is hungry for solutions. Fatigue, pain, melancholy, inefficiency. Cocaine seems to offer answers to all of it. And unlike coca leaves, this version is portable, powerful, and profitable. Companies take notice. Patents are filed. Production scales up. Cocaine moves from labs into markets, wrapped in the language of progress and innovation. You watch as caution quietly exits the room. This isn't villainy. It's optimism. The belief that humans can isolate only the good parts of something and leave the rest behind. History suggests this never works. As the century turns, cocaine stands poised on the edge of something big. It's respected. It's exciting. It's misunderstood. And the most dangerous thing about it is that everyone thinks they're in control. The leaf is gone now. What remains is powder. And powder has a way of going places its inventors never intended. Doctors start using cocaine as an anesthetic. It actually works. Surgery without screaming? Revolutionary. You're told it's safe, effective, and modern. Nobody is worried. Yet, this is the honeymoon phase. You find yourself in a 19th century operating theater. The room smells faintly of disinfectant, sweat, and optimism. Patients lie on tables that are far less comfortable than modern dental chairs. Surgeons fuss over instruments that clink like a percussion section in a symphony no one asked for. And somewhere, a student is fainting quietly. Then cocaine is applied. It numbs. It calms. It allows surgeons to cut and stitch without the patient screaming, or at least screaming less convincingly. You notice the relief on faces. Not just the patients, but the doctors too. Finally, a substance that lets you do your job without the constant threat of someone yelling in your ear. Progress feels tangible. Nurses and assistants start taking notes, awed by the efficiency. The medical community calls it a miracle, which is the polite word for this is dangerously effective, but we're going to pretend we understand it. You chew on the thought, figuratively, because actual chewing is frowned upon in sterile environments. Cocaine is hailed as a wonder drug. It appears in tonics, drops, and lozenges. Need a toothache gone? A small dab of cocaine. Got nerves? Try a tincture. Feeling tired? It might help. Doctors, pharmacists, and curious gentlemen with fine mustaches all praise it. The world feels like it has finally invented a tool that conquers both pain and fatigue at once. You notice a subtle pattern forming. Every time a new miracle is discovered, enthusiasm outruns caution. People focus on the immediate benefit, efficiency, comfort, brilliance, rather than what happens when this chemical keeps being used. This isn't evil. It's human optimism, dressed in a lab coat. Patients leave their appointments feeling improved. Some even report a faint sense of euphoria, which doctors describe clinically as pleasantly surprising. It's only slightly unsettling how quickly medical professionalism starts to blur with excitement over personal experience. You wander down the hall and see young interns experimenting under the supervision of slightly older interns who are themselves experimenting. Everyone is fascinated by the immediate effects: numbness, alertness, energy. They write papers, deliver lectures, and publish enthusiastic reports. History, at this moment, is very impressed with itself. Outside the operating theaters, cocaine quietly enters everyday life. It's in lozenges for toothaches, eye drops for tired eyes, and tonics promising increased vitality. It is respected, formal, and entirely legal. You can buy it in pharmacies, ask politely, and be handed a small package that could dramatically alter your day or your life. And yet, there's something curious. The line between medical use and recreational fascination is paper thin. Doctors experiment on themselves. Patients find it stimulating in ways the literature barely acknowledges. The world is teetering on the edge of realizing that a powerful chemical is now in circulation without societal rules to guide it. You pause and watch history taking a deep breath. The leaf that once sustained miners in the Andes is now a powder in European bottles. It's controlled, concentrated, respected, and dangerous, though nobody quite admits the last part. For a moment, you imagine what it must have been like for a 19th century dentist or surgeon holding a white crystal, knowing it could dull pain and elevate mood simultaneously. A small god in your pocket, a quiet revolution in every procedure. And yet, the shadow looms. Optimism cannot contain consequence forever. For now, it's all marvel, efficiency, and modern wonder. You step back from the operating theater, watching surgeons and patients alike marvel at the new chemical. History is smiling politely. It's proud of itself, oblivious to what comes next. Cocaine has graduated from sacred leaf to medical marvel. And if anyone thinks that makes it safe, well, history has a way of gently disagreeing. You meet Sigmund Freud, who is extremely enthusiastic about cocaine. He writes papers praising it, prescribes it, and uses it himself. You listen politely as he explains how it's definitely fine and absolutely not addictive. History quietly clears its throat. Freud is in his study, surrounded by books, papers, and the faint smell of cigar smoke. He gestures wildly with one hand while holding a small vial of cocaine in the other, like it's both a key and a wand. You sit down, trying to appear calm, though part of you suspects that the man's enthusiasm could fuel a small bonfire on its own. He talks about energy, creativity, and courage. He prescribes it to friends, colleagues, and occasionally to himself. It's perfectly safe, he says, eyes wide with conviction. It relieves melancholy and sharpens the mind. You wonder if he's counting the teeth marks on his desk from late-night note-taking. Probably not. Or maybe yes. Freud's patients receive cocaine in small doses. It is recommended for everything from depression to indigestion, and for some, simply to make life feel a little less insufferable. You watch politely as people leave the office, chewing thoughtfully, feeling alert, optimistic, and slightly suspicious of their own vitality. Cocaine circulates through intellectual circles like a polite secret. Everyone knows someone who has tried it, and everyone praises its effects. It feels sophisticated, medical, and entirely above board. You can practically see the Victorian mustaches nodding in approval. Meanwhile, the reality of dependence is quietly ignored. Freud himself occasionally mentions side effects, but dismisses them as minor. Insomnia? A temporary inconvenience. Nervousness? Only for the weak-willed. Addiction? I'm sure that won't happen to anyone reasonable. You make a mental note that reasonable is a subjective term and also likely overestimated. The world outside Freud's office doesn't care much about subtlety. People are curious. People are experimenting. They read his papers, repeat his recommendations, and trust the authority of a man with a plan, a theory, and a slightly manic gleam in his eye. History has a way of trusting confident assertions even when they come with a side of disaster. You notice how quickly cocaine becomes associated with brilliance. Students, artists, writers, and other ambitious humans start experimenting. It promises enhanced focus, increased productivity, and an almost intellectual glow. Everyone wants a piece of it because it feels like progress. And yet, there's an irony that you can't ignore. Freud praises cocaine for clarity and emotional balance, while unknowingly setting the stage for widespread misuse. What is medicine to one generation is temptation to the next. The enthusiasm of the lab and the office outweighs caution, almost as if curiosity itself is a form of gravity pulling humans toward trouble. You sit back and watch history smile politely again, like a teacher who knows you'll fail the test but enjoys your optimism anyway. Freud continues taking notes, prescribing, and recommending, blissfully unaware, or perhaps blissfully unconcerned, about the path cocaine is now carving through human life. Cocaine is no longer just a leaf or a medicinal curiosity. It is now linked with intellect, progress, and the allure of controlled enhancement. The chemical is celebrated, documented, and recommended. Everyone in Freud's orbit feels a little smarter, a little braver, and slightly immune to caution. And as you leave the office, you realize the pattern is familiar. Humans discover a miracle, trust it completely, and ignore the warning signs. Optimism, after all, is rarely cautious. You step into the streets of late 19th century Vienna, where ideas flow as freely as coffee, and somewhere in the corner, a chemist dreams of refining the leaf even further. History is patient. It waits. And cocaine, quietly, is just getting started. Cocaine-infused wine becomes fashionable. You sip it in polite company while pretending this is normal. It's marketed as healthful, energizing, and classy. You feel productive, slightly invincible, deeply wrong. You find yourself in a 19th century salon, chandeliers dripping light, velvet curtains muffling the street noise, and waiters balancing trays with tiny glasses filled with a reddish liquid that smells faintly like grapes, medicine, and ambition. Everyone is discussing philosophy, politics, and the correct posture for drinking coca wine. You, of course, are just trying not to spill it. The first sip is intriguing, slightly bitter, slightly sweet. A subtle tingle dances across your tongue, waking up parts of your body that have been on strike. You feel alert, energetic, and inexplicably sophisticated. It's like someone invented productivity in a bottle and added a splash of good taste. Conversations flow faster, laughter comes easier, and people nod knowingly as if the liquid itself grants wisdom. You look around and notice the subtle societal hierarchy enforced by the wine. Those who sip confidently are deemed cultured. Those who sip cautiously are politely ignored. The beverage becomes both a stimulant and a social test. Marketing doesn't hurt. Labels boast health benefits, energy, and vitality. No one mentions long-term consequences. This is progress as far as society is concerned. Doctors recommend it. Pharmacists sell it. And enthusiastic socialites insist it improves moral character. You notice a small nagging thought. Why does everything that feels this good also sound vaguely illegal by modern standards? As the evening continues, people are sipping more frequently. There's an air of mild euphoria combined with awkward etiquette. Everyone is slightly jittery, but polite, as though social decorum can contain the chemical thrill. You notice some attempting to write poetry or compose music mid-conversation. Results vary. Most look charmingly confused. Children and servants are sometimes exposed to small doses. It's thought to improve stamina and mood, though you can't help but imagine the chaos if modern child services had been around. The line between medicine, social lubricant, and stimulant is blurred to the point of disappearing entirely. You wander through the salon, observing how coca wine has become a statement of identity. Patrons brag subtly about its effects. Oh, I only drink it before intellectual debates. I never write letters without it. It makes chess more exciting, honestly. Each declaration feels both absurd and deadly serious. The powder in the wine works its magic. Alertness increases. Fatigue diminishes. Conversation becomes a performance, punctuated by the occasional cough, blush, or misjudged flirtation. Everyone is doing their best to appear composed, but cocaine is not known for subtlety. You notice it in your own fingertips, the faint tremor, the slight tightening in the chest, the unwarranted confidence that maybe, just maybe, you could out-argue a mathematician. By the end of the evening, guests leave feeling enlightened, energetic, and a little smug. The wine has done its job. History, at this moment, is delighted by human ingenuity and optimism, unaware that enthusiasm often outruns wisdom. And you realize something. This is a turning point. Cocaine is no longer just medicinal. It is fashionable, social, intoxicating. It is a symbol, a statement, a secret power. People are drawn to it for reasons beyond health, status, energy, performance, and the quiet thrill of using something that feels forbidden without technically being illegal. You sip your final glass, feeling slightly invincible, a little jittery, and deeply complicit in a cultural experiment that will soon spiral far beyond this glittering room. Cocoa wine is glamorous, sophisticated, and dangerous, and the rest of the world will eventually notice. History is patient, but humans are not. And cocaine is about to become a household name. Then comes the soft drink. Coca-Cola originally contains coca extracts. You watch people drink it for energy, nerves, and mood. It's sold everywhere, children included. This will definitely age well. You find yourself in a bustling soda fountain at the turn of the 20th century. The air smells faintly of syrup, carbonation, and ambition. Patrons sit on stools with polished brass rails, slurping from glasses that promise refreshment, vitality, and, unknowingly, a chemical punch. You hesitate because, technically, this is a very young version of caffeine mixed with cocaine, and yet everyone around you is calm, cheerful, and completely convinced of the wholesome benefits. The first sip surprises you. Sweet, fizzy, and invigorating. There's a subtle warmth spreading through your chest, not unpleasant, but disorienting if you remember that a medicinal stimulant is in the mix. You glance at children happily drinking, wondering if they, too, sense the slightly forbidden excitement lurking beneath the bubbles. They do not, and you relax slightly, assuming humans have always been too trusting of sugar. The soda clerk enthusiastically explains the virtues of this beverage. It improves energy, digestion, and moral character. You notice that energy is mentioned most often, probably because the other two benefits are impossible to measure and also slightly ridiculous. Patrons nod in agreement, sipping again, cheeks pink, eyes bright. The effect is subtle but undeniable. People feel sharper, lighter, almost superhuman. Advertising thrives on optimism. Posters promise vigor and vitality. Bottles are labeled as healthful tonics, and consumers rarely question the ingredients beyond syrup and carbonation. The combination of caffeine and cocaine is quietly ignored in scientific circles, or, more accurately, celebrated. It feels modern. It feels safe. It feels like progress. You walk through the crowd, observing the subtle social dynamics. Adults are energized but polite. Teenagers are jittery but convinced of their sophistication. Even the elderly seem vaguely impressed by their own alertness. Everyone believes they're doing something practical, rational, and productive. Few realize that they are participating in a chemical party disguised as refreshment. Meanwhile, the effects accumulate. Small doses throughout the day increase energy, suppress fatigue, and sharpen concentration. You notice the delicate line between stimulation and overexcitement, a fine tightrope that soda drinkers navigate unknowingly. One wrong sip too late in the day could result in restlessness, mild mania, or the inexplicable urge to reorganize your furniture. You overhear conversations praising the drink for its restorative powers. It cures fatigue, someone declares. It improves mood, says another. And a small child quietly adds, it tastes really good. History is simultaneously impressed and horrified if history had a face and could frown. Pharmacies sell bottles openly. Soda fountains serve it proudly. Children sip, parents nod, and doctors recommend it for nervous exhaustion and other vaguely defined ailments. Coca-Cola becomes part of daily life, a socially acceptable stimulant, marketed as wholesome, healthy, and entirely unremarkable. By the end of the afternoon, the crowd leaves feeling alert, energetic, and confident. You feel the same, though slightly unnerved by the thought that the chemical underpinning this happiness is now in every urban corner. History, ever patient, waits quietly as human enthusiasm transforms a medicinal leaf into a mass-market beverage. You finish your glass and step outside, watching pedestrians, children, and street vendors all buzzed, unintentionally complicit in a cultural experiment that will eventually define modern stimulant culture. And somewhere, in a small lab far away, someone is already thinking, what if we removed the coca from the formula, but kept the legend? History, it seems, is both patient and ironic. Coca-Cola is more than a drink. It's a statement, a promise, and a chemical handshake with the future. And the future, of course, will be complicated. Cocaine shows up in tonics, syrups, lozenges, and cures for things no one understands. Advertisements promise vitality, focus, and relief from literally everything. Regulation is a rumor. You can buy confidence in a bottle. You wander into a brightly lit apothecary, shelves lined with jars, bottles, and powders labeled with promises that range from invigorates the spirit to cures melancholy instantly. Every container is a miniature miracle, and every pamphlet brims with optimism, confidence, and a dash of hyperbole that would make modern marketers blush. Somewhere, a small child asks if this tonic will make them smarter. The clerk nods solemnly because why not? Cocaine is the star ingredient in nearly everything. A few drops in a lozenge, a spoonful in a syrup, a hint in a tonic. Each product promises more energy, better mood, and relief from ailments that weren't really well understood anyway. Headaches, indigestion, fatigue, melancholy, poor posture, you name it, cocaine supposedly fixes it. You wonder if someone has considered how many symptoms are caused by actually overworking and undereating, but apparently not. You notice that the apothecary hums with optimism. Customers leave energized, confident, and vaguely jittery, convinced they are participating in scientific progress. You take a small sip of a tonic labeled Brain Elixir and feel a subtle thrill in your fingertips. It tastes medicinal, like grape soda pretending to be medicine. Your mood lifts slightly, and you have an inexplicable urge to organize the pamphlets on the counter alphabetically. Advertising thrives in this era. Newspapers, posters, and handbills proclaim miraculous benefits. Testimonials abound, often written by people who definitely benefited from placebo effect, optimism, or sheer willpower. Cocaine's presence is celebrated, not questioned. It is medicine, self-improvement, and recreational enhancement all in one convenient package. You watch a gentleman purchase a bottle for his wife, who is suffering from nervous weakness. He is entirely sincere. He believes in science, medicine, and the good intentions of whoever created this elixir. She later sips it politely and feels a little more confident. History notes, quietly, that this is the perfect storm: confidence, stimulation, and lack of regulation. Patent medicines blur the line between necessity and indulgence. One bottle promises health, another promises charm, another promises energy. Every bottle contains the same powerful stimulant in varying doses. Nobody seems to mind. Everything is legal. Everything is celebrated. You take a moment to imagine the town buzzing with mild cocaine-fueled enthusiasm, and it is both charming and terrifying. You notice the pattern. Cocaine is celebrated for its immediate benefits, and nobody is thinking about the long-term consequences. Sleep, appetite, heart rhythm, mental health. These are questions politely postponed to the future. For now, the tonic works, and that is enough. Children sometimes get small doses because children are considered delicate and in need of stimulation. You quietly recoil. It is astonishing and somehow completely normalized. History, ever patient, is observing humans discovering the thrill of chemicals without the benefit of wisdom. By evening, the apothecary empties. Bottles are gone. Customers leave feeling alert, productive, and vaguely invincible. You sip the last sample in your hand, feeling clever, energized, and a little guilty. Cocaine has become both medicine and cultural obsession, wrapped in the cheerful optimism of the industrial age. And you realize something. Human ingenuity loves a miracle, especially one that is concentrated, portable, and profitable. Cocaine fits the bill perfectly. History waits, and cocaine is quietly taking over everyday life, one tonic, syrup, and lozenge at a time. The line between remedy and indulgence has disappeared, and no one notices. Eventually, people start noticing something. The energy boost lasts a little too long. Sleep feels optional. Appetite drifts away. That subtle thrill in your fingertips begins to whisper, maybe you need a little more. Welcome to dependency, quietly creeping in like a polite, persistent house guest. You walk down a busy city street in the early 20th century. Apothecaries line the blocks, windows stacked with tonics, syrups, and elixirs, all promising health, vigor, and clarity of mind. People move briskly, energized, focused, perhaps a little jittery. Some glance nervously at their pockets, where small vials of cocaine are tucked away. They've been with these vials so long. They've forgotten life without them. It starts subtly. A slight irritability when doses are delayed. A restless leg here, a racing heartbeat there. You sip your tonic in the morning and feel alert. By noon, you crave another. By evening, a small powder hidden under your napkin feels necessary to function. Nobody calls it addiction yet. That word has not fully entered polite conversation. It is referred to vaguely as enthusiasm or habit. You notice the social dynamics shift. People who can afford constant access feel invincible, energetic, and sharp. Those who cannot begin to lag, complain, or appear frazzled. Cocaine silently enforces privilege and productivity. It becomes both stimulant and social signal. The powder says, I am capable, I am modern, and I am slightly dangerous. Medical professionals begin to observe symptoms. Insomnia, anxiety, paranoia. They note increased heart rates, erratic behavior, and occasional psychosis. You overhear a doctor remarking, fascinating. I wonder if our enthusiasm has outpaced our understanding. The understatement is breathtaking. Nobody is panicking yet. Optimism is still stronger than caution. Cocaine is everywhere. Tonics, lozenges, wine, soda, and early patent medicines. It is celebrated, consumed, and recommended. And quietly, without anyone loudly announcing it, it begins shaping behavior. Dependence is creeping in unnoticed, hiding behind a veneer of respectability, health, and social sophistication. You sit in a parlor watching a wealthy gentleman sip a coca-laced drink while writing letters. His hands tremble slightly. He blames fatigue, the weather, or the erratic penmanship. History, watching silently, knows better. The substance that once helped miners survive the Andes is now subtly dictating human routines in drawing rooms across Europe and America. Dependency is polite, efficient, and easy to ignore. Unlike later substances, it does not demand attention with violence. It whispers. It smooths over exhaustion while quietly taking control. You start noticing patterns in friends, neighbors, and colleagues. Slight irritability when out of reach. Energy crashes followed by nervous surges. Faint obsession over the next dose. Cocaine has become a small but constant companion. And yet, society celebrates it. Advertisements, medical journals, and newspapers all emphasize benefits, downplay risks, and praise energy, mood, and performance. The contrast is surreal. People unknowingly tiptoe toward a dependence that is socially accepted, medically endorsed, and culturally glamorous. You step outside, observing the bustling streets, soda fountains, and apothecaries. Everyone seems productive, awake, and efficient. Few notice how subtle the shift has been. Cocaine has transitioned from medicinal marvel to quietly addictive social norm. Dependence has arrived softly, politely, and with a wink. And you realize something essential. Humans have a talent for normalizing what once seemed extraordinary. What begins as innovation, medicine, or cultural practice can quickly become invisible necessity. Cocaine is no longer just a leaf or powder. It is now infrastructure in daily life. The powder has a way of sneaking in unnoticed, and once it's inside, it doesn't leave quietly. History watches, patient as ever, while humans learn to adapt to a chemical they think they understand. Eventually, governments wake up and notice cocaine. They blink, they frown, they write long, bureaucratic letters about morality, health, and public order. The very substance once celebrated as medicine is suddenly a problem. You watch history shrug, amused but patient. You find yourself in an early 20th century city office, full of clerks stamping papers, lawyers drafting regulations, and politicians who have just discovered that humans like feeling awake and energetic. The conversation is serious, long, and vaguely panicked. It's addictive, someone says. It's immoral, says another. It's everywhere, someone else whispers dramatically, like this is news. The law responds with a mixture of caution, confusion, and hypocrisy. Cocaine is outlawed for general use, but exceptions abound. Doctors, pharmacists, and other professionals are still permitted limited access. Production continues under strict regulation, but the rules are complex, contradictory, and often ignored. Compliance becomes a polite suggestion. You observe enforcement in practice. Street dealers are arrested. Pharmaceutical companies lobby aggressively. Wealthy individuals quietly maintain access, citing medical necessity or cultural tradition. The law is applied inconsistently, sometimes vigorously, sometimes with an amused shrug. Humanity has always been better at creativity than consistency. Meanwhile, the public narrative shifts. Cocaine is now both glamorous and dangerous. Newspapers publish lurid stories of crime, addiction, and moral collapse. At the same time, advertisements emphasize energy, confidence, and modernity, sometimes in the same city, often in the same year. You blink at the irony. Nothing has changed about the powder. Everything has changed about perception. You notice how society negotiates this contradiction. Consumption becomes clandestine for some, openly medicinal for others. Rules exist mostly on paper, while reality is far messier. Children are largely kept away. Adults weigh risk against desire. Professionals still use it quietly, socially, and sometimes recreationally. The powder continues its quiet dominance over behavior, now shrouded in legal and cultural tension. The law, as it turns out, is slow. Cocaine's addictive qualities, social effects, and potential for abuse are better understood, but enforcement lags far behind knowledge. The result is a patchwork of control, compliance, and creative circumvention. You realize that humans are excellent at bending rules when something promises energy, focus, or profit. History pauses briefly to reflect on irony. A substance that saved lives in the Andes, energized scholars in Vienna, and delighted soda drinkers in Atlanta is now a criminal risk. Yet in every era, humans find a way to use it. Respect, fear, legality, morality, these factors are negotiable. The powder is patient, waiting for someone willing to risk consequence for effect. You step onto a city street and watch the contradiction play out in real time. A man hurries past, a small vial hidden in his coat. A doctor crosses the street with a prescription pad. A newsboy shouts headlines warning of cocaine's dangers. Everyone is participating in the same cultural experiment, knowingly or not. And you understand something crucial. Prohibition doesn't erase demand. It redirects it. Cocaine's journey has always been guided by human desire, curiosity, and ambition. Regulation, restriction, or moral outrage slows it down, but it does not stop it. The powder is resilient, adaptive, and quietly insistent. By nightfall, the city feels alive with contradiction. Enforcement and enjoyment exist side by side. Danger and delight occupy the same space. Cocaine is legal and illegal, medicine and vice, celebrated and feared. The human relationship with it has entered a stage of paradox, tension, and cultural negotiation. You sip a warm drink, reflecting on the absurdity. The powder hasn't changed. Humans, predictably, have. History smiles, and the story of cocaine, full of greed, power, and occasional brilliance, marches onward. You step into the roaring 1920s. The streets pulse with music, energy, and the faint hum of something chemical. Cocaine has slipped quietly into nightlife, jazz clubs, and social circles. It's fashionable, secretive, and subtly exhilarating. The air smells of perfume, smoke, and ambition. Women in flapper dresses laugh, sway, and occasionally wink as if sharing a private joke with history itself. Men in pinstripe suits tap their feet to the beat, their eyes bright with energy that may or may not be chemically enhanced. You sip a cocktail that contains a whisper of cocaine and feel the world tilt pleasantly, like someone nudged your perspective upward by a few degrees. Music dominates everything. Horns, pianos, drums. They weave a soundscape that seems endless. Everyone is awake, alert, slightly more daring than they should be. The powder amplifies the rhythm, sharpens the mind, and smooths the social edges. Conversations become quicker, dances more daring, laughter louder, and confidence dangerously contagious. You watch performers on stage, their fingers flying over instruments, their expressions fierce with focus. They may be naturally talented. They may also have had a little extra assistance. Cocaine doesn't guarantee brilliance, but it lubricates the imagination, energizes stamina, and encourages persistence. The crowd doesn't care. They are here for spectacle, energy, and subtle rebellion against the mundane. Bars, nightclubs, and speakeasies quietly become hubs of cocaine use. It's a stimulant, social lubricant, and badge of modernity all at once. The legal ambiguity adds thrill. The powder is present, conspicuous to those who know, invisible to those who don't. You notice the dance between concealment and celebration. It's an art form in itself. Cocaine in this era is intertwined with jazz culture, artistic experimentation, and urban sophistication. Writers, musicians, and socialites experiment with the powder, seeking creativity, stamina, or simply to stay awake for long nights of performance and intrigue. Some manage moderation, some, predictably, overreach. History quietly takes notes. You feel the city's rhythms sync with your pulse. The streets are alive with possibility, ambition, and faintly erratic energy. Cigarette smoke swirls with laughter. Glasses clink. Feet tap. Everyone is slightly more awake, slightly more daring, and slightly less cautious. The powder lubricates the world without fanfare, like an invisible hand stirring ambition into every movement. There's a curious glamour to it. Cocaine is fashionable because it's rare, effective, and socially coded as sophisticated. To use it is to signal energy, boldness, and participation in modern culture. Yet the effect is subtle. Nobody is bouncing off the walls. They're alert, energized, and somehow in control. For now, you notice the irony. The very powder that once aided miners and spurred scientific discovery has now become the silent heartbeat of nightlife, artistry, and social daring. Its meaning has shifted, yet its influence remains undeniable. Cocaine fuels creativity, endurance, and culture while slipping beneath scrutiny, quietly directing energy and ambition in subtle ways. And as always, there's a shadow. Overuse produces jitteriness, paranoia, and occasionally collapse. Excess leaves traces on the body, mind, and reputation. Some dancers falter mid-performance. Some musicians push beyond brilliance into instability. The thrill exists alongside consequence, balanced delicately by awareness or luck. You sip your drink, feel the energy hum through your veins, and realize something essential. Cocaine has become cultural infrastructure. It is part ritual, part stimulant, part social currency. The powder moves quietly, shaping behavior, ambition, and nightlife without ceremony or announcement. History watches, patient and wry. Humans adapt, overreach, and celebrate. Cocaine continues its quiet ascent, threading itself into art, social life, and cultural expression. And you realize, as you tap your foot to the unrelenting rhythm of the city, that the powder has mastered subtlety. It's everywhere and nowhere, influential but invisible, exciting but slightly dangerous. The jazz age is awake. And so, in its own way, is cocaine. You step into the 1970s, a world of disco lights, bell bottoms, and an unmistakable hum of chemical ambition. Cocaine has returned to prominence, this time wrapped in glamour, nightlife, and countercultural bravado. You can practically smell the polyester, sweat, and ambition in the air. The streets pulse with music and movement. Nightclubs throb with beats that demand motion, and patrons move like kinetic sculptures, energized, alert, and slightly daring. You slip into a crowded disco, feel the bass vibrate in your chest, and realize your own pulse has accelerated. Whether from music, anticipation, or the small line of powder in your pocket, it's impossible to tell. Cocaine in the 70s is stylish, accessible, and socially coded as sophistication. You notice the pattern immediately. Wealth, glamour, and nocturnal energy go hand in hand. Artists, executives, and socialites alike glide through the night, confident, charismatic, and subtly amplified by chemical help. The powder is invisible yet transformative, like a secret ingredient in a cocktail that also happens to sharpen your dance moves. The culture embraces excess. Late nights, long conversations, and endless energy are celebrated. The powder is both lubricant and accelerator, allowing conversations, creativity, and nightlife to flow without pause. Dancers move tirelessly. Musicians improvise endlessly. You sip a discreetly dosed drink and feel subtle warmth and alertness hum through your veins. Everything feels sharper, brighter, and slightly dangerous. Social rituals are energized. Conversations are quicker, laughter louder, confidence brimming. The powder enhances charisma, stamina, and sociability, quietly influencing behavior without fanfare. You notice subtle hierarchies forming. Those who can maintain composure while under the influence are admired. Those who overindulge are whispered about in tones somewhere between concern and awe. Cocaine also fuels artistic and professional ambition. Writers, producers, and musicians work long hours fueled by late-night energy, creativity, and a chemical nudge toward perfection. Productivity spikes. Social bonds strengthen. Confidence soars. All of this occurs under the radar of legality and conventional morality. The powder is patient, persistent, and polite, slipping between rules and ambitions unnoticed. You observe the irony. Once a medicinal marvel, then a glamorous social tool, cocaine is now a countercultural statement, a badge of nocturnal sophistication, and a catalyst for energy and confidence. It is glamorous, rebellious, and simultaneously banal, a chemical threading its influence quietly into the fabric of society. There is, of course, risk. Overuse produces paranoia, insomnia, and jitteriness. Parties sometimes end in collapse. Friendships fray. Careers falter. Yet the culture glorifies controlled risk, and the powder benefits from this human penchant for daring without foresight. You sip carefully, aware of the delicate balance. Advertising may be muted, but culture celebrates. Magazines, gossip columns, and music charts quietly glamorize energy, glamour, and nightlife, while cocaine fuels it invisibly. You notice how humans consistently normalize what excites, energizes, and elevates social status. History, patient and amused, observes the same patterns repeating over centuries. By dawn, the city is still alive. Nightclub lights dim, but a faint hum of energy persists. You step into the early morning, feeling alert, slightly guilty, and fully aware of the powder's subtle but pervasive influence. Cocaine has quietly reclaimed its place in culture, threading through nightlife, ambition, and artistic energy once again. And you realize something essential. Human desire, ambition, and social energy are remarkably consistent. And cocaine, patient, invisible, and persistent, remains a faithful companion. History smiles quietly. The powder thrives. And so does the night. You step into the 1980s, a world of power suits, corner offices, and a relentless obsession with energy, performance, and wealth. Cocaine has infiltrated Wall Street, quietly lubricating ambition, confidence, and the occasional questionable decision. The air smells faintly of expensive cologne, stale coffee, and ambition. Traders pace the floor, shouting into phones, flipping papers, and moving like caffeine alone could not sustain them. A discreet line of powder promises to keep them sharper, faster, and just alert enough to convince themselves that they are indispensable. You take a sip of your cocktail, or maybe it's tonic with a hint of white powder, and suddenly your own pulse feels synced with the frantic rhythm of the trading floor. Cocaine is glamorous here because it signals success, endurance, and audacity. The people using it are energetic, polished, and slightly jittery, but they radiate confidence. Everyone knows someone is using it, and everyone tacitly acknowledges that it is part of the social fabric. It is both stimulant and status symbol. You notice the subtle hierarchy. Those who can manage long hours, high stakes, and chemical assistance are admired. Those who fail, they disappear quietly. Work becomes a performance, amplified by the powder. Decisions are made faster, conversations sharper, confidence bordering on delusion. You watch traders type frenetically, gesturing wildly, negotiating enormous sums with the intensity of someone who has temporarily removed fatigue from human experience. It is impressive, terrifying, and completely fueled by ambition with a little chemical help. The culture glorifies speed, risk, and energy. The line between productive stimulant and dangerous excess blurs. Overuse produces paranoia, insomnia, and occasional collapse, but the world rewards those who can maintain composure under pressure. Cocaine thrives in this environment. It is patient, reliable, and invisible to anyone not paying close attention. Social rituals on Wall Street are energized too. Luncheons, client meetings, and after-hours gatherings hum with quiet stimulation. Confidence flows more freely. Conversations are sharper, and charm is enhanced. The powder supports both performance and impression, threading itself subtly into the fabric of social interaction and professional success. You notice irony at every turn. Once celebrated as medicine, then glamorized in nightlife, cocaine is now a tool of ambition, power, and status in the financial world. It shapes decisions, stamina, and social perception without ceremony or acknowledgement. You sip carefully, aware of the delicate balance. The powder is invisible yet potent, silent but indispensable. Media coverage is a mix of fascination and alarm. Stories abound about reckless traders, risky deals, and the occasional collapse. Yet the culture largely ignores caution in favor of performance. Demand continues to rise, fueled by desire, competition, and the human need for speed. You see the cycle clearly. Ambition plus stimulant plus social reinforcement equals persistent use. By the end of the trading day, the city hums with energy. Offices empty slowly, but the pulse of ambition persists. Conversations linger, phones ring incessantly, and the powder continues to whisper promises of alertness, confidence, and audacity. Its influence is subtle, pervasive, and persistent, and you realize something essential. Cocaine thrives wherever energy, ambition, and social performance are valued above all else. It adapts, persists, and quietly shapes human behavior, threading itself through culture, power, and daily life with a patience few humans can match. History watches, patient and wry, as humans continue their dance with energy, risk, and chemical enhancement. And Wall Street, like every society before it, is quietly electrified, energized, and entirely complicit. You step into the neon glow of 1980s nightlife, where velvet ropes, flashing lights, and booming music dominate the landscape. Cocaine pulses quietly through this world, invisible yet omnipresent, energizing celebrities, socialites, and anyone willing to chase glamour at all costs. The clubs are packed. Smoke curls lazily through air scented with perfume, hairspray, and ambition. Patrons glide across dance floors, cocktails in hand, their energy amplified by a powder that promises stamina, confidence, and just enough daring to make everything more fun. You sip cautiously and feel a subtle hum, a quiet reminder that this city never sleeps, and neither do its habits. Cocaine is glamour personified. Stars enter clubs and limousines, exuding confidence that may or may not be chemically enhanced. Their eyes sparkle with energy, their movements precise and fluid, and their charisma amplified. Every gesture seems effortless, every laugh slightly sharper, every conversation more captivating. You notice that subtle acceleration of life, the powder invisibly threading itself through culture, performance, and perception. Media coverage both glorifies and condemns. Tabloids chronicle decadent parties, secret lines, and the occasional scandal. Magazines celebrate glamour, wealth, and nightlife, while quietly ignoring the chemical hand behind it. You overhear someone remarking, "They're just so energetic," and realize that energy itself has become a status symbol. Cocaine, patient and invisible, ensures it. You watch a celebrity glide past, greeted by fans and photographers. Her stamina is astounding, her presence electric. Behind the scenes, she sips a discreet drink containing the powder, a secret nod to energy and focus. The pattern is repeated across the club. Ambition, appearance, stamina, all subtly lubricated by cocaine. You sip your own tonic and feel an odd kinship with this quiet, invisible infrastructure of energy. The culture thrives on excess. Long nights, fast conversations, and continuous performance are celebrated. The powder is a facilitator, allowing stamina and charm to appear effortless. Conversations hum, music pulses, and dance moves are tireless. It is a chemical whisper behind every confident smile, every daring action, every subtle risk. You notice the irony. Cocaine is simultaneously glamorous, illegal, and socially endorsed. Its use is widespread, yet secretive, a paradox the culture celebrates. This contradiction fuels allure, forbidden, yet normalized, invisible, yet essential, dangerous, yet desirable. You feel it yourself, subtly influencing your energy, mood, and perception. Dependency lurks quietly. Overuse produces insomnia, jitteriness, and paranoia, but the culture glorifies controlled risk. The powder thrives in the balance, enough to energize, entertain, and enhance, but carefully moderated to avoid collapse. Humans, predictably, both overreach and survive, caught between glamour and consequence. Outside, the streets hum with neon energy. Taxi horns, music from open club doors, and laughter combine into a symphony of nightlife. Cocaine threads itself through every interaction, enhancing charisma, endurance, and sociability without fanfare. Its influence is subtle, pervasive, and persistent, quietly shaping culture, ambition, and perception. By dawn, the club's empty. Patrons leave fatigued, exhilarated, and slightly altered. The powder has done its work invisibly, leaving traces in energy, confidence, and memory. You sip the last of your tonic, feeling subtly alert, complicit, and aware of history quietly repeating patterns. Cocaine, like history itself, thrives in contradiction. It adapts, persists, and quietly shapes the culture around it, invisible but indispensable. Celebrities, nightlife, and media frenzy are simply its latest stage, and you realize something essential. Wherever glamour, ambition, and social energy intersect, the powder will quietly follow, patient, invisible, and utterly persistent. History watches. Cocaine continues to pulse, discreetly but unmistakably, through human life. You step into the late 1980s, a world still glowing with neon, ambition, and excess, but now tinged with consequence. Cocaine, once the invisible companion of glamour, nightlife, and Wall Street, begins to show its sharp teeth. You notice subtle changes first. Faces lined a little more deeply, eyes bright but jittery, conversations fast, then collapsing into silence. Smiles stretched, confident, but hiding fatigue that cannot be fully erased by charm or powder. The culture begins whispering about what was always quietly true. Stimulants have consequences. Medical professionals start documenting patterns with increasing urgency. Heart problems, insomnia, anxiety, psychosis, all quietly linked to sustained use. You overhear doctors discussing patients who collapse in offices or clubs, exhausted bodies finally catching up with relentless stimulation. Cocaine has been patient, but humans have been overambitious. You wander through media coverage, and it's a strange mix. Some stories glorify nightlife and glamour. Others publish cautionary tales of collapse, addiction, and tragedy. Society starts reconciling the contradiction. The powder is fun, useful, and socially desirable, yet increasingly dangerous. The public begins to notice patterns, and culture slowly, reluctantly, adapts. You observe subtle behavioral shifts. Friends, colleagues, and acquaintances seem less invincible. Their energy, once effortless, now carries a faint tension. You notice jittery movements, restless speech, and occasional paranoia beneath the surface of confidence. The powder, invisible and patient, is still there, but it leaves traces. Its influence is no longer purely glamorous. It now carries a shadow. Cocaine's cultural narrative evolves. Glamour becomes caution. Productivity begins to be questioned. Social rituals that once celebrated excess now quietly acknowledge risk. The powder is no longer just a facilitator. It is a factor to negotiate, a chemical whisper that demands awareness. You notice irony in every direction. Humans always normalize what excites them. The same powder that fueled Wall Street, Hollywood, and nightlife now forces confrontation with mortality, health, and limitation. The cultural reckoning is subtle, slow, and often incomplete, but undeniable. Cocaine, patient as ever, continues to thread through society, shaping ambition and behavior with a new layer of consequence. Dependency is no longer invisible. Stories of collapse, overdose, and addiction surface. Rehabilitation clinics quietly open, offering treatment to those who misjudge the balance between desire and limit. The powder is still glamorous to some, dangerous to others, and both to nearly everyone. Its duality defines a generation's reckoning. You step onto the streets and observe culture in motion. The neon energy still pulses, the music still plays, and ambition still hums. But now there's awareness, a cautious respect for limits. Cocaine is not entirely villain or hero. It is influence, shaping choices, energy, and perception quietly but persistently. And you realize something essential. Chemicals follow human desire. They amplify ambition, creativity, and risk. But consequences are inevitable. Cocaine, ever patient, has waited centuries, quietly threading through culture, and now history begins to catch up. Humans, predictably, adapt slowly, learn harder lessons, and continue dancing with contradiction. By nightfall, the city is still alive, though the energy is tinged with awareness. Patrons, executives, artists, everyone negotiates between stimulation and consequence. Cocaine remains invisible, influential, and persistent, but now shadowed by its legacy. History, as always, observes with patience and wry amusement. Humans chase energy, glamour, and success. Cocaine, patient and adaptable, continues to accompany them, quietly shaping culture, ambition, and life. You sip your tonic, slightly alert, slightly contemplative, and fully aware that the powder story is far from over. You step into the present day, where the world hums with energy, screens glow, and a legacy of cocaine lingers quietly in both history books and popular imagination. It's no longer just a secret in speakeasies or a hidden stimulant in Hollywood. It is now part of a broader cultural conversation. You notice patterns immediately. Social media is filled with glamour, nightlife, and curated energy. Clubs still pulse, music vibrates, and ambition has shifted into digital realms. Cocaine persists as both symbol and substance, a reminder of excess, a facilitator of energy, and a subtle marker of status. Its presence is quieter, less glamorous, yet no less influential. The cultural perception is complicated. Some people openly condemn it, emphasizing health risks, addiction, and legal consequences. Others romanticize the era of excess, referencing Wall Street brokers, disco nights, and celebrity glamour. You find yourself caught between fascination and caution, witnessing how a substance can carry centuries of cultural significance while quietly shaping behavior. You wander into a modern social scene, a dimly lit club, music thumping, cocktails circulating. The atmosphere is electric, energetic, and polished. Conversations flow quickly, laughter is loud, and charm is abundant. Cocaine's influence is subtle but present. It enhances stamina, focus, and sociability without requiring acknowledgement. Its role is both invisible and undeniable. You notice generational differences. Older users recall history, glamour, and excess, sometimes wistfully, sometimes critically. Younger users are cautious, aware of risks, and often influenced by social media narratives. Yet across decades, the patterns remain. Human desire, social energy, and chemical enhancement intersect in predictable, fascinating ways. Health awareness is stronger now. Medical research documents long-term consequences, heart issues, mental health challenges, and addiction. Harm reduction strategies circulate, and treatment programs offer help to those who misjudge the balance between desire and limitation. Cocaine has become a substance carefully negotiated rather than casually celebrated. Legal status also shapes perception. Its illegality contrasts with cultural fascination, creating tension between desire and consequence. People navigate nightlife, parties, and professional circles with subtle awareness, balancing ambition, social energy, and the potential for fallout. Cocaine continues to thread through human behavior quietly, adapting to shifting cultural norms and regulatory frameworks. You notice irony everywhere. A substance that once energized minors, inspired artists, and lubricated ambition in the elite now occupies a liminal space. Illegal yet culturally referenced, dangerous yet alluring, historical yet present. Humans continue negotiating contradictions that have existed for centuries, and the powder, patient and adaptable, continues to exert influence. Social perception is also performative. Some people romanticize use, others denounce it. Pop culture references, movies, music, and news stories remind society of cocaine's past glamour, risk, and cultural impact. It exists simultaneously as cautionary tale and symbol of ambition, influence, and audacity. By nightfall, the city is still alive. Music pulses, people navigate social spaces, ambition hums through workplaces and nightlife. Cocaine remains an invisible companion, threading itself through culture, energy, and human behavior, quietly but persistently influencing perception, confidence, and stamina. And you realize something essential. The story of cocaine is not simply chemical, it is human. Desire, ambition, and social energy consistently intersect with substances that amplify, accelerate, and sometimes endanger. Cocaine, patient, adaptable, and persistent, continues to move quietly through history, culture, and human life. History watches. The powder adapts. Humans continue, energetic, ambitious, and slightly reckless. You sip your tonic, feeling alert, contemplative, and fully aware that the story is ongoing, invisible yet undeniably present. You step into a courtroom, or maybe it's a conference room, where stacks of paper, legal briefs, and government memos loom like small skyscrapers of bureaucracy. Cocaine is at the center of it all, quietly threading its way through the contradictions of law, commerce, and human desire. The legal battles are elaborate, confusing, and occasionally absurd. Lawyers argue over definitions, classifications, and historical precedent. Regulators debate limits, penalties, and enforcement strategies. You watch from a corner, sipping a warm drink, wondering how a tiny white powder has inspired such monumental paperwork, yet somehow remains invisible on the streets, in clubs, and even in offices. Enforcement is inconsistent. In some cities, arrests are dramatic, with headlines shouting moral outrage. In others, police tolerate small-scale use quietly, focusing instead on trafficking or public disruption. The law is patient, human enforcement is not. Cocaine, subtle and persistent, slips between regulations like a shadow. Pharmaceutical companies, lawyers, and lobbyists participate in a careful dance. Cocaine is classified, restricted, and regulated, but exceptions exist for medicine, research, and industrial use. The rules are complex enough to inspire a minor headache or a major existential crisis. But history has shown that human creativity thrives under complexity. You watch the powder move quietly through these loopholes, invisible but undeniably present. Courtrooms are theatrical. Judges, lawyers, and plaintiffs perform elaborate rituals. Objections shouted, exhibits displayed, witnesses sworn in. Everyone speaks in serious tones, as if the fate of society depends on their eloquence and comprehension of chemical law. Meanwhile, cocaine continues its subtle work, quietly influencing behavior, culture, and perception outside these walls. Public perception oscillates. Some celebrate strict regulation as moral victory. Others decry it as overreach. Stories abound of arrests, scandals, and hidden use, demonstrating the persistent allure of a substance simultaneously forbidden and desired. Cocaine thrives in this contradiction. It is simultaneously dangerous, glamorous, illegal, and culturally embedded. You notice irony in enforcement. Wealth, influence, and discretion often protect some users while penalizing others. The law, though ostensibly impartial, bends around privilege, social status, and economic power. Cocaine adapts quietly, moving where oversight is weaker, always present, subtly shaping ambition, creativity, and social interaction. Regulation also sparks innovation. Chemical variants, new delivery methods, and clandestine distribution networks emerge, showing human ingenuity and adaptability. Cocaine is patient, waiting for culture, law, and desire to intersect. Every rule inspires workarounds. Every prohibition fuels quiet persistence. You sip your drink and marvel at the elegant persistence of both human ambition and chemical influence. History observes quietly. Generations of legal battles, moral panic, and regulation have attempted to contain the powder. Enforcement ebbs and flows. Public awareness waxes and wanes. Yet cocaine endures, threading through society in subtle, invisible, and persistent ways. By nightfall, you walk through streets still alive with energy, music, and ambition. Enforcement exists, rules exist, and cautionary tales exist, but the powder, patient and adaptable, continues its quiet work. It threads through culture, ambition, and desire, often unseen but undeniably influential. And you realize something essential. Laws cannot fully suppress energy, curiosity, or ambition. Cocaine, subtle, persistent, and infinitely patient, continues to follow human desire wherever it leads. History smiles quietly. Enforcement struggles. Humans persist. And the powder, always invisible yet undeniably present, continues its patient journey through time. You step into a world of screens, pages, and sound waves, where cocaine has become both subject and symbol. Its influence stretches from movies to music, from novels to tabloids, shaping perception, fantasy, and cultural imagination. The powder is everywhere and nowhere, invisible yet utterly present. Movies dramatize its allure and danger. You watch a silver screen flicker to life, glitzy parties, flashing lights, fast-talking characters, all energized by the invisible presence of a tiny white powder. Actors move with stamina, charm, and sometimes visible jitteriness. The audience knows the stakes, glamour and excess entwined with risk. You sip your tonic and realize the cultural echo of centuries of human fascination with energy, rebellion, and ambition. Television, music, and literature join the narrative. Pop songs hint at nightlife, indulgence, and the thrill of the forbidden. Novels describe secret lines in back rooms, subtle glances between characters, and the exhilaration of heightened energy. Media amplifies history, embedding the powder into collective imagination. It is no longer just a chemical. It is a symbol, a cultural shorthand for ambition, excess, and daring. Advertising and celebrity culture quietly reinforce the idea. Even when cocaine is not explicitly mentioned, its aura lingers. Parties, fashion, nightlife, and energetic success are glamorized. The subtle association between energy, charisma, and social success reflects centuries of human interaction with stimulants. You notice the irony. The powder is illegal, dangerous, and controversial, yet continues to inspire admiration and aspiration. Social media now spreads the imagery at lightning speed. Memes, stories, and videos portray cocaine in ways that are at once humorous, glamorous, and cautionary. It becomes a shorthand for a lifestyle, sometimes admired, sometimes derided, but always acknowledged. Humans have adapted history into symbolism, and cocaine has followed them there, patient, invisible, and influential. You notice patterns in storytelling. Cocaine is used to heighten tension, demonstrate ambition, or illustrate the pitfalls of excess. Characters who indulge often embody extremes: brilliance, creativity, risk, and occasionally downfall. The narrative is consistent across decades. The powder accelerates energy, influences decisions, and shapes outcomes in ways both visible and invisible. You sip your tonic and marvel at the continuity of history and culture. Yet, shadows persist. Media also portrays collapse, addiction, and consequence. Warnings exist alongside glamorization, subtly reminding audiences that excess carries risk. The powder's cultural depiction is dual. It inspires fascination and caution simultaneously, threading complexity into stories that are entertaining, compelling, and sometimes morally instructive. You wander through a gallery of media examples: films with glitzy parties, novels with late-night creativity, news articles charting highs and lows. Cocaine threads through each, invisible yet persistent, shaping narrative, character, and audience perception. It is part chemical, part symbol, part cultural force. And you realize something essential. Cocaine's influence extends far beyond the body. It shapes imagination, social perception, and cultural storytelling. Humans, ever inventive, have woven its presence into the fabric of entertainment, folklore, and aspiration. The powder, patient and invisible, persists in stories as it does in reality. By the end of the day, you are aware of its duality: glamour and danger, desire and consequence, energy and caution. Cocaine continues to shape not just action, but imagination, quietly, invisibly, and inexorably. History smiles quietly. Culture amplifies. Humans continue, ambitious and energetic, always negotiating the presence of the powder in both reality and imagination. And you sip your tonic, subtly alert, contemplative, and aware that the story of cocaine is as much about society's imagination as it is about the substance itself. You step into a world that stretches from the Andes Mountains to urban streets across the globe. Cocaine is no longer just a cultural symbol. It is a product, a commodity, and a complex network of production, distribution, and trade. Its journey is long, convoluted, and if you think about it too hard, slightly absurd. You start in the high-altitude villages of South America, where coca leaves have been cultivated for centuries. Farmers tend their fields meticulously, each leaf a small contribution to a global chain that will eventually reach clubs, offices, and homes far away. The leaves are dried, processed, and transformed into a powder that moves invisibly through society. You walk between the rows, noticing the rhythm of hands, the scent of earth, and the quiet persistence of a tradition that has been co-opted by global demand. The powder enters a network of transport routes, moving through mountains, rivers, and cities. It passes through hands both legal and illegal, hidden in shipments, concealed in cargo, and quietly slipping past oversight. You observe the logistics: drivers, couriers, middlemen, and distributors, all participating in a system both fascinating and ridiculous in its complexity. Cocaine thrives on ingenuity, patience, and secrecy. The economic impact is profound. Entire regions depend on its cultivation, distribution, and sale, creating wealth, instability, and occasional chaos. Governments attempt regulation, enforcement, and intervention, often with mixed results. The powder persists, adapting to new routes, methods, and technologies. Its resilience is remarkable, patient, persistent, and remarkably good at evading control. You notice irony everywhere. A substance vilified in some countries is cultivated as a source of income in others. Enforcement varies wildly depending on geography, politics, and social status. The powder threads through economies, cultures, and regulations, quietly shaping global patterns. You sip your tonic, marveling at the contrast between tiny leaves and global consequences. Transportation networks are elaborate. Smugglers innovate constantly, using planes, boats, vehicles, and sometimes highly questionable creativity to move product. Cocaine's journey is part chemistry, part logistics, and part human cunning. You watch as it threads from production to distribution, patient and invisible, influencing countless lives along the way. Markets are unpredictable. Price fluctuations, enforcement crackdowns, and consumer demand all interact in a delicate dance. Cocaine's influence on global economics is subtle but undeniable. It shapes decisions, fuels ambition, and quietly affects the flow of capital across borders. You imagine spreadsheets, briefcases, and clandestine operations humming with invisible energy. Social impact is equally complex. Communities near production zones experience both wealth and instability. Urban centers consume energy, nightlife, and social capital fueled by the powder. Everywhere, humans negotiate desire, legality, and consequence, and cocaine threads through all of it with a patience honed over centuries. And you realize something essential. Cocaine's story is global. It connects continents, cultures, economies, and ambitions. It threads through human desire, ingenuity, and social structures in ways both visible and invisible. The powder is patient, adaptable, and persistent, quietly shaping human behavior from high mountains to city streets. By nightfall, the world hums with interconnected energy. Cocaine moves unseen, influencing culture, economics, and society. Its journey is long, intricate, and subtly powerful, reminding you that even a tiny white powder can have monumental impact when combined with human ambition. History smiles quietly. Humans negotiate, adapt, and pursue. The powder threads through it all, patient, invisible, and utterly persistent. You sip your tonic, contemplative, aware that the global story of cocaine is far from over, and that every interaction, transaction, and glance is part of a network centuries in the making. You step into the present day, where cocaine continues to occupy a peculiar space. Illegal yet glamorized, taboo yet whispered about, dangerous yet culturally coded as excitement, ambition, and social energy. Its presence is subtle, invisible to some, obvious to others, and always persistent. You find yourself in a modern social scene, a club pulsing with light, music vibrating through the floor, and people moving with effortless energy. Conversations flow quickly, gestures are animated, and laughter echoes like a soundtrack. Cocaine is not advertised, yet its influence hums quietly beneath the surface, enhancing stamina, charm, and audacity without overt acknowledgement. You sip your tonic and feel a subtle alertness, aware of the invisible cultural thread that has persisted for centuries. Media, fashion, and music continue to reference its history and allure. Movies depict fast-living characters, novels describe high-energy nights, and songs capture the thrill of forbidden excess. Cocaine has become more than a substance. It is a symbol, a shorthand for ambition, daring, and glamour. Its legacy persists even as awareness of risk and consequence grows. You notice the patterns. Social perception is paradoxical. Some condemn, some romanticize, some simply ignore. Awareness of health risks, legality, and social consequences has increased, but desire and fascination remain. Cocaine threads through social rituals, nightlife, and even professional ambition, quietly shaping energy, focus, and confidence. It is invisible, adaptable, and persistent. Generational differences are striking. Older users recall history, glamour, and consequences. Younger users navigate social media narratives, cultural references, and peer pressure. Yet across all generations, the patterns are consistent. Human ambition, energy, and curiosity intersect predictably with stimulants that enhance performance, sociability, and daring. Cocaine threads through these patterns quietly, shaping choices and experiences. You notice irony everywhere. Once a medicinal marvel, then a glamorous social tool, now a symbol of culture, taboo, and caution. It has adapted to each era. Its history threads through centuries of human ambition, energy, and social behavior. Even in its absence, it shapes expectations, perceptions, and imagination. Cultural reflection is subtle. Documentaries, articles, and art explore its history, influence, and consequences. People negotiate between admiration and caution, fascination and avoidance. The powder continues to operate invisibly, shaping ambition, creativity, and social interaction without fanfare. Its persistence is almost philosophical, patient, adaptable, and enduring. You step back and observe the broader context. Cocaine's story is a mirror of human desire, our fascination with energy, charisma, risk, and performance. It threads through nightlife, professional ambition, glamour, media, and global trade. Its influence is subtle but undeniable, shaping not just behavior, but imagination, culture, and perception. By nightfall, you are aware of the duality. Cocaine is simultaneously glamorous and dangerous, forbidden and normalized, cultural and chemical. Its story is human, intertwined with ambition, creativity, and societal trends. It threads through centuries of history, shaping life in ways both visible and invisible. And you realize something essential. The powder's journey is inseparable from human curiosity, risk-taking, and desire for energy and influence. History, culture, and society all reflect this intersection, and cocaine continues to patiently, invisibly, and persistently weave through it. History smiles quietly. Culture adapts. Humans continue, energetic and ambitious, negotiating the balance between desire and consequence. You sip your tonic, contemplative and alert, aware that the story of cocaine is ongoing, subtle, and omnipresent. Its presence threads through history, society, and imagination, patient, invisible, and enduring. And now, you feel the slow hum of awareness, the quiet rhythm of history, and the gentle reminder that human desire is timeless. And so is the powder that has followed it.